So what I went out and bought was a 3-step kit called Metal Effects, and it's by Modern Masters, which is a subdivision of Rust-Oleum. And so this is going to kick it up a little bit above just regular new copper. We've got the primer, the paint, which has actual copper bits in it, and an oxidizer, which will give the patina. And so the primer is special to this, that it will actually block any effects that the oxidizer has. You can get different ones of these, so they have it in iron, bronze, or copper, and that will give you rust. I believe it's a blue patina for bronze and green patina for copper. And I just thought that that would kind of kick this up a notch, give it a distressed look, kind of make it something that pops out and stands out, and kind of goes with that Offline feel, a little dystopian, oh, my connection's down feel. Add some interest to the piece. So we're going to be going over how you use that today as well. Okay, so now that we've finished sanding, we're going to take our damp rag and we're just going to wipe it across the surface real quick, just to get the worst of it off. Try not to soak the wood too much. And you only need to do it on the parts that you really want paint to stick to. Wipe down our surface here as well. Make sure we don't recontaminate. Let's get the worst off for the back. Doesn't have to be anything special. Just use a rag. Again, see, I'm just moving across it quickly, because again, you don't want to be painting on a wet surface. Make sure you get in the eye. And we're going to go over it with a dry cloth just to get any of the excess dampness up. All right, so now that this piece is prepped, we are going to lay out some paper. There we go. This will allow us to paint without getting it everywhere. Don't forget to shake up your paint. I don't need my eye protection anymore. Since this is basically just an acrylic, I'm going to be using my little paint dish. Really work this up and pour some of it in here. I'm going to grab one of these little pieces here and stir this up, because that's what they say to do. And we're just going to dip that in and work that across the surface. Try to work towards the edges, not in from the edges. I find that if you pull your brush up like this, you can see I just got a bunch of extra paint on that edge, and that's not going to look good. So try to work from the center out towards that edge. If you see any excess, get at it. You don't want it to dry like that. Just make sure you get a nice thick coat, at least with this metal primer. It goes on thick. And I just happen to be going with the grain. Again, make sure you work from any of the inside edges. You want to work out from those, so pull out, so that way you don't end up with a bunch of extra paint, primer in this case, in one spot. Make sure you get all the spots that you want to paint with this primer. And sometimes I'll have to like kind of jam my brush in the corners, and that'll end up messing up like what I have for going on for grain. And I just kind of swipe back over it. And again, use that technique to pull all the excess paint off the edges. So it's best to kind of go from the jam spot and work your way out. With this primer, they say that you want to mix it even while applying. Again, I'm trying to lift out the excess paint so that way I don't end up with what looks like drips. Check from different angles. You might have a couple spots where a bunch of excess paint ended up. Working our way out. And then just cleaning everything up. Pro tip is to elevate your piece. You take some chunks of wood or something and kind of lift the piece off the table. It allows for drips to come off of the piece. It also separates your protection from the piece so it doesn't get stuck to it. For other parts, you can actually kind of get up underneath and make sure that everything has good coverage. Walk around the piece to make sure that from all of the angles, everything is nice. I just noticed I've got a huge drip here. I've also noticed I got a drip there. And this is why we walk around the piece to address any imperfections before they dry into the piece. All right, we're gonna let that set. I'm gonna clean the brush and my materials, and we're gonna go from there. All it takes to clean your brush is a little bit of hot soapy water, and that should come right off. You want to do it before it solidifies or else it's going to ruin the brush. All right, so it looks like our piece is dried nicely. And it looks like I've got pretty good coverage with my primer. We're going to go with a second coat. In between the coats, you're going to want to use some fine grit sandpaper. So I'm going with like a 240 because I'm going to paint over it again anyways. So I'm going to take a little bit of this, just get rid of the worst and prep it for the paint. And of course, then we'll take the wet cloth again and get rid of the fine grit before painting. Try not to stay in one spot too much. I'm just trying to get rid of the parts that are bumped up the most. I'm gonna go around the edges now, just lightly. So I've got some bubbles. If you can see, there's some drip marks on the back side here. Gonna hit that with some 120 grit because that is pretty thick. And you can use your power tools on this, but I was looking to do some light finishing work, so all you really need to do is get it away from the edge there. You can also use a sanding block. That'll help keep you from kind of going over the edges a little bit. When you're hand sanding, just be careful because this can get really hot really quick. Circles kind of works the best, I find, to knock it down really quick. So it's okay if you accidentally expose some of the wood edges because we are going to be doing a second coat of the primer to really smooth things out. You don't have to do this if you're looking for a more distressed look. That is more than okay to do it the way you want. This is basically filling in the minor imperfections. You'll notice with this primer, it gets kind of this light brown where you've actually touched it. And that kind of will help you see where it is that it was higher than the rest of the material. I know this is a pain in the butt, until you see the results. It'll make your piece look professional instead of amateurish. So if you skip these steps, yeah, you'll still get an okay result. But I've found that if you want to get that kind of next level result, there's a reason why professionals do all these extra steps to get that next level result. All right, so we've gotten the worst off. We're gonna set back up to paint another layer. So just like last time, we're gonna be using our damp cloth. Again, using our primer. All right, guys, so it's been 2 days now. I went ahead on the other day and put the first layer of the oxidizing copper paint onto this. As it said in the instructions, you put it on one, let it dry. Now we're going to put on the wet layer that's going to be the oxidizing layer, and then use the green patina aging solution along with a sea sponge. You can either do that or use the included spray to just spray it directly on. If you want a more full coverage, you're going to use the spray. I'm going to use the spritzer just to get this wet, because it's going to give me a more amorphous kind of pattern. Going to set that aside, take out our wet rag. If you want, you can go ahead and sand a little bit between coats to help even everything out. I'm not going to, because I want it to be distressed anyways, but I'm going to just make sure that no dust kind of accumulated on this. So just quickly rub the damp rag across it, get the worst. Also, if you notice you have drips, you're gonna go at it again with the sander just to get that back off. It is cold in the garage today. Had a snowstorm, so that's why I wasn't able to get this done as fast as I would have liked. All right, so now that that is sitting there, I'm just letting it dry a little bit. We can start setting up our patina. And you want to be careful what you get this on, because it's a corrosive agent. I'm going to take out the included nozzle. Put that right in there. All right. And shake up our paint. And you're going to want to mix this again while you're painting, just to make sure it stays stirred up. A little bit goes a long way with this stuff, I've found. Only have a tiny bit in that cup. As you can see, it's kind of marbled. So I'm going to stir it up. And we're going to start laying down our paint. We're going to follow the same method that we did with the primer and work our way from the inside out. But I'm going to be working a little quicker than normal, because this all needs to be wet when we put the reactive chemical on top of it, the activating agent. Now we're going to work our way along our edges, trying to eliminate any buildup as we move. And we do this by moving from the center out towards the edge. If you go against an edge and kind of, if I went across these edges instead of up and away, you end up with a bead of paint there that you do not want. You want to make sure that your support material is not sticking out, because that's where paint can build up. You don't want that. All right, so now we've got our wet layer down, and basically I'm going to take my sea sponge and my spritzer. I'm going to spritz away. Really get that kind of soaked. and just getting different kind of patterns on here. Trying to get the sides here as well. Just do whatever pattern you want. Make sure that your sponge is nice and damp. After you're done, put the top back on there. Keep this a little separated from everything else. And yeah, it's gonna take a little while. You're gonna use your damp rag to kind of clean it off of your hands or your clothing. You wanna do that before it dries.